Hello, in this video we will discuss about the ischemia and reperfusion in cardiac cell. So what is the ischemia and reperfusion in cardiac cell? Basically is the when the coronary artery can be damaged which that transfuse the oxygen or perfuse the oxygen into the myocyte will be damaged. When damaged, the ischemia is a condition which the blood flow and thus oxygen is restricted or reduced in a part of the body. So that when oxygen restrict, several tissue can be involved, but in this video we will just understand about in cardiac cells. So cardiac ischemia is the name for decreased blood flow and oxygen to the heart muscle, and the reperfusion means the resuscitation of oxygen to the tissue again after the ischemia. So in this way, here is the person which does contain blood circulatory system, contain heart, and this heart contain myocyte, which that is a easy picture to understand. The oxygen will move into the myocyte, is known as the perfusion, and the reperfusion after the ischemia, when the inhibition of the oxygen, again the resuscitation of oxygen is known as the reperfusion. So in this way, here is the heart, which that contain a coronary artery, descending and transverse, circumflex artery, and there is a lot of. So in this way, here is the arteriosclerosis can be occur will lead to inhibit the oxygen perfusion into the myocyte. That is coronary circulation blockage lead to heart stop and working, and apoptosis and necrosis of the myocytes can be occur. So anyhow, the ischemia, the post conditioning, we can detect and we can provide the pharmacological activation of risk pathway, and risk pathway we will discuss in another video, and it is important for the basically survival of the myocyte, and pharmacological inhibition of mitochondrial PTP opening. So this inhibition, why the inhibition? Inhibition will lead to prevent the apoptosis. So the acute myocardial infarction will lead to cardioprotective strategy will use, will lead to myocardial reperfusion, and in this way the less lethal reperfusion can be possible. So let's begin to understand. Here is the heart, which that contain coronary artery. I am drawing the bigger picture of the coronary artery to understand the ischemia and perfusion through cardiomyocyte. So this is the ischemia is the left side, and the reperfusion is the right side cell. So this is both are cardiomyocyte, but the situation is different. So we can understand collectively. So when the hypoxia will occur due to the coronary blockage, will lead to anaerobic respiration when the glucose can be enter through GLUT4 channel and amino acid, for example, and free fatty acid, which that will lead to glucose provide the ATP smaller amount, and the hypoxia will lead to anaerobic respiration to produce pyruvate, and pyruvate will convert into the lactic acid to produce and increase the proton, lead to decrease the pH, and in this way this is known as the lactic acid fermentation. Without the oxygen is the anaerobic fermentation, and here is the mitochondrial PTP closed the channel, and in this way due to the lower pH will close, and the calcium is also increased will lead to close the MPTP, and in this way the decrease of the ATP through hypoxia will lead to produce AMP, and AMP trigger the AMPK pathway will lead to inhibit the mTOR for protein synthesis, and the AKT phosphorylation will lead to AKT protein will inhibit the several function, and myofibril contracture will decrease due to the low pH, proton increase, and the calcium basically also low will lead to myofibril contracture will inhibit, and the hypoxia obviously will not provide the ATP. So in this way the myocardial contracture will inhibit due to the decrease of the ATP also. So the inhibition of this AKT pathway will inhibit the FOXO1, because it involves the gluconeogenesis, glycolysis, and atrophy, apoptosis inhibition through MTP, bad bags, and FKHR and caspase inhibition, and the necrotic factor kappa B for cell survival and risk pathway will inhibit. We can resuscitate and we can pharmacological inhibition of mitochondrial PTP opening. So in this way, here is the proton, the move out into the blood circulatory system, and ultimately the acidosis can be occur. But here is the sodium will inside move, while on the other hand the calcium also move inside through two sodium exchange. And in this way, the calcium increase will lead to inhibit the MPTP and closed. So in this way, here you can see the cardiomyocyte, which that is lactic acid produced to physiological pH drop. And in this way, the proton can move out, will lead to during the reperfusion, the oxygen is rich now. So the calcium, which that is here, is in decrease due to the outflux of the calcium by a 2 sodium exchange. And in this way, the decreasing of the calcium will trigger the sarcoplasmic reticulum to outflux of the calcium into the cytoplasm. For increasing of the calcium will lead to inhibit the lower pH, and the lower pH and the calcium increase will lead to myofibril contracture will increase. And also the ATP will produce more, which that is because the aerobic respiration will begin. While on the other hand, the mitochondria will calcium will increase, and decrease of the calcium will also outflux of the calcium through MPTP opening of this channel due to the decrease of the calcium. When so in this way, the decreasing of the calcium will lead to also open, and in this way the damage of the mitochondria to produce reactive oxygen species will lead to sarcoplasmic reticulum triggering, as well as the inflammation cause will recruit the neutrophil, lead to inflammation, and in this way the reperfusion containing cardiomyocyte can be reperfusion injury formation. The reperfusion injury here you can see. This is due to this function. A reperfusion injury can be lethal or not lethal. It depends. So here is the DNA, which that is also damaged due to the reactive oxygen species, which that will damage the DNA and also cause the different dysfunction of the cell. And on the other hand, the important thing is that the reperfusion can be we can cardioprotective strategy we can use to involve the reperfusion injury prevention. But in the normal condition, the reperfusion injury can be occur will lead to damage the heart cardiomyocyte. So the damage of the heart cardiomyocyte is known as the ischemia in cardiac shock. So this cardiac shock is due to the or heart attack can be occur due to the dysfunction of the cardiomyocyte when the ischemia will occur. And after the reperfusion injury can be formed or not.